We have to tell the truth about even those we vote for. That's why I don't endorse them. I vote for them.
You've been critical of Harris in the past. I know at one point I think you called her a centrist candidate who acts progressive. Do you think those who've criticized her prosecutorial record, or maybe her record as Attorney General, will be able to see past it? I mean, obviously, right now the choices are Biden-Harris or Trump-Pence.
Right. I think right now we've got to be part of an anti-fascist coalition of conscience. You see our dear sister use Martin Luther King Jr.'s language, coalition of conscience. We've got to make sure Trump leaves the White House one way or another, either by election, or if he loses and he won't leave, then some of us will have to just go and escort the brother. You know what I mean? It's time to go. You've done your damage. But we can't be under any illusions. When Biden and Harris get in there, if they still tied to Wall Street, still tied to the militarism, Africa, if they still tied to not dealing with quality public education, if they're still tied to their same old neoliberal elites, then we're just going to have another slow disaster rather than a quick catastrophe. With Trump, you got a quick catastrophe. He's got to go. That's why I myself, even as a radical, and I just want Trump people to know, I'm a radical. My dear sister Harris is not a radical. She is she's a centrist and a moderate. I love the sister. She's my AKA sister and everything. But at the same time, I recognize that when it comes to the serious class struggles that are going on, the class war of the bosses against workers, she hasn't always been on the side of the workers. Neither has Biden.
What's interesting, because
Biden linked to the major mass incarceration regime in the modern world. He helped create that. You know what I mean? So that we have to tell the truth about even those we vote for. That's why I don't endorse them. I vote for them.
I'm Afshin Rattansi, and you're watching another lockdown edition of Going Underground, a very special edition when we're joined by one of the great philosophers of our time, Professor Cornel West. He joins me now from Princeton in New Jersey. I've got to say, Angela Davis on this show endorsed Joe Biden in November. Noam Chomsky has endorsed Joe Biden. Do you think that Joe Biden will save us from another nuclear conflagration as we commemorate the dead of Hiroshima?
Well, my dear brother Martin Luther King Jr. said that my own government is the biggest purveyor of violence in the world. And of course, now we've got 800 military units around the world. Russia and China together have 30. We've got 4,800 military units in the whole world, including the United States. So I think Martin King's legacy is one in which we have to take very seriously: the relation between the poverty at home, the militarism at home and abroad, the unbelievable materialism. It's a spiritual decay in the empire that we're talking about. And then, of course, the white supremacy, not just the black people, but indigenous people, brown people, Arabs, Muslims, Jews, Iranians, and so forth. So that, Sister Angela, I understand, Sister Angela, I am part of an anti-fascist coalition, so I could see voting for Biden in a swing state, but I could never endorse an architect of the largest mass incarceration system in the modern world that was targeting poor people, disproportionately Black and brown poor people, or bragged about being part of the architecture of the invasion and occupation of Iraqis. Over 500,000 precious Iraqis killed owing to that U.S. invasion and occupation. Not a mumbling word, not just from Biden, but from anybody for the most part. There's some exceptions, Bernie Sanders and Ro Khanna, a few exceptions, Barbara Lee, but for the most part, not a mumbling word. So I love Sister Angela. And I may, in fact, if I had a choice between a neoliberal disaster and a neo-fascist catastrophe, I would go with a neoliberal disaster. That's who Biden is. He's a neoliberal disaster. He's milquetoast. He's mediocre. He is a neoliberal centrist, and he's tied to Wall Street. He's tied to Pentagon. He's tied to militarism. And he was very much responsible for institutional racist prison system that we're still coming to terms with in the killing fields, on the killing fields of American ghettos and barrios. So that we're in an unprecedented moment, brother. We really are. We're in one of the pivotal moments in the history of the species. The species itself could go under, given the ecological catastrophe or nuclear catastrophe. We've got escalating levels of wealth inequality that are out of control. The greed is running amok. And then the levels of corruption, the greed, the hatred, Wall Street, Pentagon, they are in control of the empire and they are taking it off a cliff. And the sad thing is that the rest of the world has to deal with some of the ugly consequences and effects. But I'm not despairing. I'm not paralyzed by despair, but I'm very honest and candid about the darkness.
Of course, your president, Donald Trump, would be the first to say that Iraq was a mistake. He said only the other day that one of the United States' greatest mistakes was to be in the Middle East. He may not share your ideas or the ideas of many about climate change, but he's the one who's saying intervention has been wrong, that foreign policy has been wrong. And he even argues that mass incarceration is a Biden policy, is an Obama policy.
Well, no, I mean, President Trump has facilitated an even more intensely vicious treatment of precious Palestinians. He is not just in cahoots with Netanyahu being the reactionary authoritarian leader, xenophobic to the core, and has no feeling whatsoever for precious Palestinians. He and Trump are like white on rice. They like wet on water. He also facilitates the vicious treatment of our precious brothers and sisters in Yemen, mediated through Saudi Arabia, mediated through the elites, unaccountable monarchs and princes and so forth. So that when he talks about he's got a critique of the United States in the Middle East, he's lying again. And the United States has blood on its hands in Saudi Arabia and Yemen, has blood on its hands in Tel Aviv and Gaza and the West Bank. I don't know what he's talking about when he's talking about what the United States should never have intervened. The United States already is operating. Those armies could not exist in Israel and Saudi Arabia without U.S. support. That it was working class folk who were misled by Trump because the working class was so devastated under the neoliberal rule of Obama that he delivered for Wall Street. He delivered for Pentagon. He did not deliver for working people. Working people were looking for an alternative. 65% of white men voted for Trump. 52% of white women voted for Trump. So you've got a racial arc here. You got a racial trajectory that's going on. Now, we have magnificent white brothers and sisters who are part of the Black Lives Matter movement. We have magnificent white brothers and sisters who are part of serious struggle against white supremacy. But they got a lot of cousins. And their cousins are easily misled by the strong man.
How do you characterize the DNC as a system in your politics?
Well, I mean, it's in more trouble now than it's ever been because there is, in fact, tremendous critiques of the establishment of the Democratic Party. It looked as if after the November primary that Bernie Sanders and all of us together, Nina Turner and others, that we were going to win. We were really beginning to move in a way that we were headed toward the White House. It then had the ideological unity facilitated by Barack Obama with Sister Amy. We had Brother Pete. All of them came together, dropped out within a few days. The Black neoliberal leadership that is hegemonic in Black leadership, hegemonic in Black politics, came together. And lo and behold, we were pushed out. We were defeated. But let me say this, that the establishment knows, very much like the Republican Party establishment was undercut by Trump, that young people on the street, the Black Lives Matter movement, they understand not just the limitations of the neoliberal leadership, no matter what color, but they know that it cannot deliver. Look at what the pandemic right now. It cannot deliver safety. It cannot deliver protection. It cannot deliver education. Cannot deliver goods and services. Why? Because the empire is in shambles when you have so much greed and corruption and indifference toward the suffering with no public life, no public health care, no public, robust public interactions. And we can't even hardly have a public conversation. Well, K Street in general generates legalized bribery and normalized corruption within the halls of Congress. So the very house that is supposed to be the house of the people caters much more to the donors and the benefactors than it does the suffering people themselves. That's precisely why so many American citizens look at the system in the United States and say it cannot reform itself because the money is overwhelming. It's been colonized by the lobbyists who are tied to corporate elites, tied to financial elites. So that it makes it very difficult for those of us in the streets to feel as if we can actually have the kind of impact that we like, but we do it because it's right, because it's moral, and because it's just. And so when it comes to ecological catastrophe, in which the whole species, the planet itself can go under, and you still have the greed, the short-term thinking, the obsession with profit, you can begin to see just how barbaric predatory capitalism is for the species in regard to our very preservation.
Professor Cornel West, thank you. That's it for this lockdown edition of Going Underground. We'll be back on Monday. Stay safe.